Disclaimer, this video about Soviet anti-tank dogs includes a product placement of a merchandise campaign on everpress.com/mhv. Well, time to take a look at Soviet anti-tank dogs in the Second World War. Now there are quite many myths and misconceptions flying around these dogs, yet for now let us look at the Soviet document that claims a rather insane effectiveness for this weapon. Although anti-tank dogs were already used in 1941 during Operation Barbarossa, the following mention in the Soviet General Staff study for the Battle of Kursk in 1943 got me really interested. Whereas interested in that case means extremely suspicious and curious at the same time. To quote, "The dogs were highly effective means for blowing up tanks. Operations by platoon of these dogs in the defensive belt of the 67th Guards Rifle Division, Voronezh Front, serve as an example. In a single incident in which 16 dogs were expended, 4 of which were killed before they reached the tanks, the platoon used dogs to blow up 12 enemy tanks." The conclusion on the section Mine Demolition Obstacles during defensive operations that contained that part also notes, top secret equipment, in that case those were remote minefields detonated by remote controls, and tank destroyer dogs are highly practical means of destroying enemy personnel and especially combat equipment. Now, if that sounds too good to be true, you might be onto something here. So at first, let us take a critical look at the source itself, namely the Soviet General Staff study for the Battle of Kursk. Luckily, the work was edited and translated by Glantz and Orenstein, and they left a few footnotes on the most glaring errors. Interestingly enough, those are mostly when it comes to tanks, which probably comes down to the fact that both sides had rather clear records here. Anyway, here are some of the errors pointed out in regards to tank operations. The studies notes that before the beginning of the operation, the correlation of forces with respect to tanks in the 6th Guards Army sector was in the enemy's favor, while on the main attack axis the enemy's numerical superiority in tanks amounted to a ratio of 1 to 1.5 and even greater. The editor's remark here is as follows. 6. Editor. Here, the Soviets routinely inflate German armored strength by about 200 tanks. Apparently they counted the 17th Panzer Division tanks in the total and some of the German anti-tank guns. Thus the initial correlation of forces was closer to even, and when the 5th Guards Tanks Army was included, the correlation swung decisively in the Soviets' favor. For the famous tank battle at Prokhorovka, the numbers get very interesting for the 11th to 12th July. It notes for the German side, this grouping of 3 SS Panzer Corps divisions numbered more than 600 tanks, including more than 100 heavy tanks Tigers and self-propelled Ferdinand guns. Here I looked at several sources, including the Russian historian Valeriy Zamulin. Let's begin with the semi-official history by the Germans. It notes that only 15 Tiger tanks were operational on that day and only 5 fought in the area of the battle. Glantz notes that on the previous day, records of the German Corps show that there are about 250 tanks and assault guns and fewer than 20 Tigers. Whereas the Russian historian Valeriy Zamulin in his book The Battle of Kursk, controversial and neglected aspects, note in his table on the operational tanks for the rebel and corps that 15 Tiger tanks were operational and a total of 239 tanks and 58 assault guns, hence a total of 297. So less than half of the 600 tanks noted in the General Staff study. And about the Tigers, well, let us be generous here, at least not every tank was a Tiger. And speaking of Tigers, until the 30th May you can get your hands on this Sturmtiger t-shirt. Get it on everpress.com/mhv. But back to the topic, time to look at kill claims. For the operations of the 5th Tanks Guard Army, the General Staff study notes, as a result of 5 days of combat, the Germans lost around 300 tanks, 20 self-propelled guns, more than 200 guns of various calibers, around 500 motor vehicles, and also more than 4,500 soldiers and officers. Glantz's footnote is rather straightforward. This too is either an exaggeration or wishful thinking. Actual German tank losses in combat on the approaches to Prokhorovka were approximately 70 to 80 tanks of various types, plus about 40 tanks in the 3rd Panzer Corps. The 5th Guards Tank Army lost about half, 450 of its more than 800 tanks and self-propelled guns. Now generally all sides exaggerated the kill claims as discussed with Peter from Tank Archives in the length in this video. Yet there is another major issue, namely the implied extreme effectiveness and efficiency of these anti-tank dogs. After all, the claim for one incident was 16 dogs took out 12 tanks. To put this in perspective, from a video on the Flak's 88 effectiveness and efficiency, I looked at various shots to kill ratios. Sadly, those are limited, but in general they ranged from an absolute best of around 6.5 shots per kill claim to around 40 rounds per kill claim for tanks, whereas these dogs would have had a ratio of 1.3 dogs per tank kill claim. Jentz looked at those shots fired by the Flak 88 versus British tanks in North Africa and it was in Soviet Russia and noted, for those engagements where the range was short enough to observe the results, 54 tanks had been claimed as knocked out through an expenditure of 613 Panzergranaten, an average of 11 Panzergranaten per tank. This is quite close to the expenditure of ammunition per claimed kill reported by the 2. Batterie Flak Regiment 701 in South Russia. If the dogs only came close to such an extreme effectiveness, I'm extremely baffled that the Soviets did not breed and train them in the 10,000s, because that would have been enough to destroy the whole German Panzerwaffe. Now the answer to why these dogs were discontinued might be more related to them having no effect at all. For this we look at German sources for the Battle of Kursk, but first let us discuss one common claim. One claim I heard and read a few times was that these dogs were hard to shoot, because they were rather small targets and fast moving targets. Well, small is rather relative, since if you're shooting at an enemy soldier that is in cover, I think he provides a smaller target. Of course, he's usually not moving, but unless these dogs were trained to run evasive maneuvers, they would mostly run in a beeline to the target. And you know what Panzers are armed with? Yes, machine guns. And the closer the dog gets, the bigger target it gets as well. Sadly, I found only one statement on this, but it seems to confirm my assessment. This is referring to 1941. To complement the minefields, the Russians also used mine dogs, which they scrapped 2 kg explosive charges to their backs and which they set against the German tanks. The commander of a German tank regiment says about these dogs' missions, "I have not yet heard of any case within our attack area that a trick of Red Army soldiers succeeded. We shot all the dogs." So let us look at the initial claim again. Dogs were highly effective means of blowing up tanks. Operations by a platoon of these dogs in the offensive belt of the 67th Guards Rifle Division Voronezh front serve as an example, in a single incident in which 16 dogs were expended, 4 of which were killed before they reached the tanks. The platoon used dogs to blow up 12 enemy tanks. So we have the 67th Guards Rifle Division here. When I asked Dr. Roman Töppel about this issue, he looked into his sources and notes. He determined that this incident refers to the 5th July 1943. Additionally, the anti-tank dog unit claimed 150 German soldiers killed as well. As such, he looked at the loss numbers for all German units of the 40th Panzer Corps. For the 3rd Panzer Division, 1 Panzer IV was an unrecoverable loss and 23 soldiers killed. The 11th Panzer Division lost 1 Panzer III and 1 Panzer IV as unrecoverable loss and 18 soldiers killed. For the Großdeutschland Division, the number of tank losses are missing for that day, but the total unrecoverable losses for the 5th July to 10th July are 3 Panzer IIIs and 9 Panzer IVs. Additionally, 70 soldiers killed on the 5th of July. Additionally, Panzer Regiment 39 lost 3 Panthers. Furthermore, he notes that he didn't encounter any indication of anti-tank dogs in the various sources that he examined for that period and relevant units. To conclude, the claim that 16 dogs blew up 12 Panzers seems to be backed up by nothing. Neither the general weapon destruction potential of anti-tank weapons of World War II, dogs' capability to reach Panzers, nor German records. German records don't even confirm that the attack took place, or at least was worth mentioning. Another issue is that the number of tanks blown up is substantial, especially for such a small unit, namely a platoon. Remember, a division consists of several dozens of platoons of all kinds, and the Battle of Kursk saw several dozens of divisions on each side. Another issue is, if these dogs were that effective, why was there no large-scale usage of them after the Battle of Kursk? Did nobody read the report? Did nobody believe that part of the report? Unless further information surfaces, my conclusions for now is that anti-tank dogs were not really effective, and as such the program was stopped, or at least not necessarily heavily expanded to have a significant impact. Well, I hope you liked this episode. A big thank you to Dr. Töppel for looking into his notes and providing a lot of detailed information. As always, sources are linked in the description. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for watching and see you next time.